Hi to everybody. So I'm Nancy Goldstein, and my specialty, my consultancy specialty, is helping people and organizations hustle for funding and media and staff in highly competitive environments. I do that by helping them convey their value and their impact. I help people make their case. So when it comes to that last part, I coach job seekers, and I also, hey, hi there, Erica Harris. I coach job seekers. I also work with organizations looking to make the right hire, and that's something that I learned how to do when I was working as a recruiter, leading senior searches for a multinational investment firm. It had US 50 billion under management, and I helped lead executive searches for the CEO. I also led recruiting searches looking for associates at top tier schools. So what does my work look like? Well, for example, I was the lead writer on a proposal that netted $250,000 for a plastic recycling organization in Serang, Indonesia. We got that grant from USAID to help clean plastic out of marine environments. And I both led the writing on that proposal and then led the reporting. Or I media trained the late Dr. George Tiller's lead legislative aide. I media trained her and placed her on the Rachel Maddow show to speak the night that his killer was sentenced. And as I said, I led senior searches in venture capital. I led recruiting trips to Brown and Cornell and Berkeley and Stanford. Like any mid-career professional, some of my achievements in retrospect fall into the you win some, you lose some category. For example, I was on the Working Families Party media team in 2014 that helped to re-elect Andrew Cuomo. Ouch. Or in 2011, I worked with the Center for Constitutional Rights to help sort of defend Julian Assange from charges basically of treason in the wake of the release of the U.S. Embassy cables. So I call what I've just done in these first few minutes credentializing. I'm letting you know that other people or institutions that you've actually heard of have worked with me, have hired me, have trusted me. And we're talking here about how you make the case for yourself quickly and memorably, which is exactly what you need to do mid-career. Potential employers or really journalists or funders really only have three questions. Why you? What's your value? What's in it for us? So let's get to that. The challenge is learning how to tell a sort of concise, memorable story, what we sometimes tell an elevator pitch. But it also needs to be a through line that goes through your resume, your cover letter, the networking that you do, even your negotiations, and certainly your LinkedIn profile and other social media profiles. And I have to say that in general, most of us are not used to doing this. Even in this day and age when people are no longer working 25 years at a place and getting a gold watch, looking for a job is not something that we do with enormous frequency. There's also the disadvantage that we are inside ourselves and we don't have the perspective of an outsider. So people's storytelling about themselves tends to be chronological, all-inclusive, waiting for the other person to pick out the highlights. I just came from teaching a class at McGill University to some music students on how to write the bios that they need to submit anytime that they apply for a young performer's slot or try to get funding. And almost everybody begins with like, I am currently a third-year student at McGill, because they're drawing from memory. But that's not what the other person wants to hear. The other person wants to hear your highlights. No one learns anything when someone who has applied for a field organizer job says, I am a field organizer. They already know that. They learn something when you say, I was a field organizer for a campaign that turned a red district blue for the first time in 15 years. The point of your story is not to be all inclusive. The point of your story is to lead with your value and have someone be interested in hearing what you have to say next. At this point, I sort of want to stop, and I'd like people to put in the chat box some of the challenges that they're facing as mid-career job seekers. I have my own ideas, but I'd like to hear if you have anything that you've had trouble addressing before I proceed. I'm going to give you a few minutes. Right, absolutely. Knowing what your skill level is worth in terms of compensation. Yeah, that's a really hard one. I have to tell you, I think that the answer to that is a combination of looking at other organizations' 990s. I think you're probably familiar with GuideStar. So any nonprofit has to file its 990s. And that means that you can go to a free service like GuideStar and look through their 990. Around page 5 usually has their top 5 officers. They must report what they're being compensated. So while my favorite method is to be able to have a conversation with someone at an organization who's willing to talk about money, people do tend to be really uncomfortable with that. So a way that you can see in black and white what people are being paid at similar organizations to yours or similar positions that you're looking for is to look at the 990 of an organization, a couple of organizations, and get a feel for what people are paying in general and what they're paying relative to their scale. An organization with a $100 million budget is going to be paying differently than an organization with a $2 million budget. I hope that that's helpful. Other questions about this? I think that there's a couple of things that make people mid-career professionals, and that makes your job search different from entry-level people or senior-level people who also have to convey what their value and their impact is quickly and memorably. Oh, yep, absolutely. I agree. So someone has written that they're over 40, they've got a visible disability, they're a recent college graduate, they're having trouble finding work in their chosen field, and it seems hard for employers to get past age and disability. Absolutely correct. I think that ageism is real, and so is ableism. I have to say that I think that you are making me get to my last point first, which is I can help you with a lot of the fine tuning. At the end of the day, networking, making sure that when you apply, there's someone inside the organization who can flag your materials and make sure that someone actually looks at it is still the name of the game. No one can, quote, get you a job, but the day of the blind resume, of sending something through the fax machine and having someone pick it up, I think that ended around the mid 90s. So, one of the things that you can do to help yourself out, besides being able to convey your value quickly and concisely, is also making sure that you're applying to places where there's someone on the inside who can make sure that your materials are being seen or that there's a better chance of you getting interviewed. And that means going back through your LinkedIn and back through your college and back through your entire memory and finding people who are actually doing things that you find engaging or working at organizations that you find engaging and reaching out to them. Here are some of the other challenges that I think that mid-career professionals face. One of them is that you are at the point where you need to justify if someone is paying you what they're paying you instead of paying for an entry-level person. The other thing is that your career can no longer easily fit on a single-page resume, and you've got some hits and misses, like the ones that I mentioned for myself. A third factor is that you've done a number of things that were really hard that maybe you can't talk about. Maybe they didn't come to fruition. Your candidate lost. Maybe this really big project that you did got bogged down in the works and nobody put up that website that you worked so hard on. After all of your time on it, you left and there's no evidence to show of what you mostly did for a year. Another is that you are working as part of a coalition and you're not sure how to claim your part of what got done, or you're aware of being in a very small world where anything incriminating you say can and will be used against you. This is, I just want to say that I am like a 100% fan of Netroots Nation's decision to go online this year. I'll also say that it makes this workshop particularly hard because we are in a very small pool. And I think that people are likely to be much less forthcoming about what they're looking for, who they are, what their obstacles are. So we'll do the best that we can with this format. As an exercise, what I'm going to ask for next is for you to write down what you would lead with as your greatest accomplishment. Here are some examples from what I heard at McGill. They're different because these are um, undergraduates, but for example, it was useful when someone led with them being the first at something, the youngest to win something, the only person in a certain area to win something. Again, this example about perhaps you didn't feel that your achievement was huge, but it was the first time something blue had happened in a red state or district. It was the first time that certain communities became involved in a campaign because of your efforts. It was the first time that certain voices got heard. I had one kid who had just sold a song to the Jonas Brothers. That kind of shut us all up for a while. But not everybody's achievements. For example, I have to say that my girl crush from this last Netroots Nation is Ayanna Presley's now chief of staff, who led her campaign. And had she lost that campaign, I think she would probably be qualifying for this workshop right now. But she won, and now her resume says that first she ran Presley's campaign, and now she's chief of staff. Take a second and think about what you would quantify as either one of your greatest achievements or sort of an eye catcher. Again, the point of the workshop is to learn how to tell this sort of concise, compelling story about your value and your impact. So take a couple seconds to do that. By the way, my host just let me know that there are 9 of you watching this stream. So if even 3 people have the courage to write something down so we can talk about whether you're on target and how you might want to change that, that would be really useful. So while you're thinking, or possibly in place of our being able to do anything that's participatory, I'd like to talk to you about some of the really common errors that I see. So one of them I've already mentioned, which is that people start with a chronology of their career. Um, Once I did this, and then I did this, and now I did this, or this is what I'm doing now. This is a statement about what you're doing, not a statement about the impact that it has had. The other is that people are still sending in resumes for a job search that I just helped to conduct, where I think this is something people started doing 20 years ago, where the top line says what they're looking for. I am a mid-career legislative aide looking for my next challenge. They already know that because you responded to the ad for a legislative aide. What they need to know is what you can do for them. And that means talking about something that you've already done that would impress them. So here I would give you 10 resume or elevator pitch fixes based again on my doing a recent job search for a job that was paying 6 figures. The resume or the pitch needs to be shorter. It should never be more than a single page, double-sided. And frankly, everything should be able to fit on that one page, because your resume, again, isn't an autobiography or a life story. It's a greatest hits, and it's a marketing tool. And its primary purpose is to interest the person reading it to invite you for an interview. By the way, this is a highly gendered thing. I found that on the whole, the women I work with tend to be more anxious than the men about leaving things out or about starting with their greatest accomplishment instead of something that they've most recently done. I say that by the time you're at mid-career and maybe even before, drop it. You want to start your pitch to someone with the most impressive or memorable thing about you, the thing that they're looking for, not the thing that you're looking for. Your pitch needs to be readable in terms of font and type, something serious and simple and businesslike. I am a Times New Roman person. The purpose of your pitch is to credentialize yourself to the point where they're willing to take the next step with you. So, for example, the fact that I work for D.E. Shaw probably doesn't mean anything to you because we're probably not all in finance. But the fact that I can say that I worked for a firm that had 50 billion in aggregate tells you that whoever I was working for, they were big. This wasn't some back room. So again, people may not have heard of the people that you were working for or the name of the organization, but there's probably something about what you did or how large you were or how mighty you were that is an attention point and a selling point. Show, don't tell. Think of all of those horrible personal ads that you've read, and I know everyone's swiping them now, and still the bio says something like, I am really funny. Yeah, no, you're not. You'll know if someone's funny because they make you laugh. So when you're doing your pitch, if your point is that you're concise, be concise. If the point in a follow-up note to someone you just had an interview with is that you are inquisitive or that you're a good listener, demonstrate that by responding or having an additional thought to something that you discussed during the interview. By the way, I've been thinking about your point about, and I would say that, or I just saw this article that related to it. Again, show, don't tell your qualities. Change from what you did, or maybe even what you accomplished, to the impact that your work had. Not, I led 700 trainings. I mean, it's impressive, but what did they do? As a result of the training that I led at Netroots Nation, 4 people, got to the end stage of their interviewing, or people reported back to me that their next online campaign got 15% more sign-ons. Quantify and contextualize your achievements and impact, including writing summary statements. Instead of, when I list something that I've done on a resume, for example, it doesn't just say, I worked at this place. I describe something about what the organization was in case they've never heard of it. And I do a couple of top lines about what my primary projects and achievements were in that position. Again, the last thing that you want anybody to do is have to pick through this sort of wall of words or this wall of text to find out the valuable part. You want to put that part up front for them. It's often the case whether you're applying for funding or you're applying for a job or you're pitching to a journalist that they're not actually the gatekeeper. They need to speak to an editor, or the program officers need to present their proposals at a larger meeting. So you don't want them to spend any amount of time wondering what the value was and what you pitched to them. You want to give them the exact thing they need to say to the next person to move you to the next stage in the process. Again, no one learns anything when I say I'm a fundraiser, but heads might turn when I say I tripled the intake on the last 3 online campaigns I designed. Again, I want to stop here and see if people have any additional questions or if anybody wants to give me an example. Again, I apologize. This is usually a much more interactive workshop. I decided that I would, rather than go to Zoom, where any kind of interactive work we did would show up as a blank, let's take a chance on this format. So let me give you a couple of extra seconds to see if you have any additional questions. Well, look, thank you for your time. My email address and my website are in the description for this workshop. Please feel free to follow up if you have an additional question, and good luck with your job search. Thank you so much.